Welcome to our discussion on Are Single-Sex Schools or Classrooms Effective? By Katie Oliveira and Brittany Shermer. The topic we will be reviewing is Are single-sex schools or classrooms an effective way to educate students? Our table of contents or agenda for today will be an icebreaker, overview of the history of single-sex schools and classrooms, key questions to think about, a Learning Matters separate classrooms video, discussion of the pros of single-sex schools and classrooms, single-sex education study video, discussion of the cons of single-sex schools and classrooms, review of key questions, implications for the future, and an activity, which will be a discussion on Padlet. Before we continue with our discussion, we have included a presentation packet for you to view and use along with this video. We have also posted the links to the videos and Padlet icebreaker and activity we will be using during our discussion today. You may want to have these links open and ready on your web browser for easy access during the discussion. Thank you again. We are going to take 2 minutes and complete a Padlet icebreaker activity. Please take 2 minutes and list everything you know about single-sex schools and classrooms. You may find the link to the Padlet discussion written below or posted on Play-Doh. The code is 5565 to access the discussion. You may want to pause this video while you go and complete our discussion. Now that you have completed the activity, I believe most of you probably posted about Bay Path since it is a single-sex college for girls in our area. Many of you might not be familiar with single-sex schools or classrooms since co-ed schools are more popular in our area. During our discussion today, we are going to be talking about Are single-sex schools and classrooms an effective way for students to learn? The history of single-sex schools and classrooms. The United States had mostly single-sex schools until the late 19th century, when economic factors forced schools to begin co-ed schooling. Before then, girls were sent to their gender stereotype schools for homemaking or strictly female professions. Before 1970, less than 1% of medical and law degrees were earned by women. The civil rights movement and women's movement brought changes to the schooling. When Title IX passed in 1972, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender, it opened up opportunities for women to start attending predominantly male universities. A fun fact about Title IX is that it is named after the 9 people who dedicated their time to shaping equality in education. The No Child Left Behind Act in 2001 included a provision for single-sex education in public schools and authorized money for those schools to try it. Before 2006, educators were at the mercy of the legal world due to the 1996 court decision of the United States versus Virginia that ruled any district wanting to set up single-sex schools or classes required exceedingly persuasive justification. 2006 regulations by the Department of Education allowed districts to establish single-sex classes or schools for any reason, and provisions made it easier to create schools rather than single-sex classrooms in a co-ed school. Our key questions to think about in today's discussion are single-sex schools a legitimate option for creating an educational atmosphere of gender equality? Are single-sex schools considered inherently unequal or equal according to our Constitution? Is this mainly a question of culture and preference? Are single-sex schools fostering a positive social climate amongst the students? Are single-sex schools preparing students for cross-gender interactions in society? Are single-sex schools actually improving academic achievement for both sexes? We are going to take a minute and watch a Learning Matters separate classrooms video. This is a video which talks about the positive attributes one school, Bailey Bridge Middle School in Midlothian, Virginia, saw by implementing single-sex classrooms for 6th graders. The YouTube link can be found written below on this slide or posted on Play-Doh. You may want to pause this video while you watch the other one. The video is about 10 minutes long. In the video, you saw what students and parents thought about single-sex classrooms. Many of the students said they felt that they were doing better academically and it was easier to learn. The parents who we saw spoke, discussed how they liked the program and thought their child's academics were increasing. We also saw the teachers say that they felt they had a better relationship with the students and their families when they had single-sex students in their classroom. You also heard how behavior decreased in the single-sex classrooms. However, you also heard from the ACL who believe single-sex classrooms in schools are considered inherently unequal and go against the Constitution. They believe Title IX should stay the same. You also heard how there is no conclusive research which shows single-sex programs show any conclusive improvement academically. As we go through our discussion, we will be talking about many of the points which were brought up during this video in our pros and cons discussion. Pros of single-sex schools and classrooms. Single-sex schools have more studies in a serious climate. There is a reduction in harassment from the opposite sex, which we saw in the previous video that we just watched. Single-sex schools allow teachers to construct a brain-friendly environment for both sexes, focusing on each gender's learning style. We also heard from a teacher in the previous video we just watched say how she felt she had a better relationship with her students. Distractions due to the opposite sex are eliminated and studies are emphasized. Single-sex schools improve self-esteem and an ability of self-concept in female students, which we saw a female student discuss this in our previous video, saying how she felt more comfortable in the classroom discussing activities and raising her hand for questions. Students report feeling more comfortable raising their hand and expressing their confusion. They feel they will not be teased or harassed by the opposite sex. We also saw this in the video we just watched from a boy saying how he felt more comfortable raising his hand in the class and asking a question. They receive more individualized attention without fear and pressure from the opposite sex. Our pros of single-sex schools and classrooms continued. Single-sex schools improve academic achievement in females and in some studies, males also. Studies show improvements in short-term academic accomplishments. Underprivileged students may derive the most benefit from single-sex schools, seeing as their community would have more access to the vital skills that they will need to further their education. Behavioral issues are diminished with single-sex schools, as we just saw in the video we previously watched. They discussed how their behavioral issues in the single-sex classrooms are notably decreased. More opportunities for students to have the same sex teacher and role model in the school. This could be very important for students who struggle with finding the role model in their life. Single-sex schools addresses the treatment of genders in co-ed schools. Males are called on more and permitted to speak longer in class. They are encouraged to challenge and question the classroom, and they receive more precise and informative feedback. We are going to take a minute and watch another video called Single-Sex Education Study. This is a 2-minute long video. This is a video which focuses on the cons of the single-sex schools and classrooms. A UT psychology professor, Rebecca Bigler, discusses why it is not a good idea for boys and girls education to be in a single-sex classroom. You can find the YouTube link listed below or posted on Play-Doh. You may want to pause this video while you proceed to the next video and watch it. Welcome back. In the video you just watched, you heard a UT psychology professor, Rebecca Bigler, speak about how single-sex schools are not a good idea. She states the world is a co-ed place and students need to learn how to interact with cross-gender people. We also heard Rebecca speak about how the studies show no benefit over co-education schooling. We heard in the video that single-sex schooling could lead to an exaggerated sexism and more gender stereotyping. Cons of single-sex schools and classrooms. Schools believe it is too expensive to have single-sex schools. Funds could be appropriated to other aspects of the school, and each classroom could become a single-sex classroom, instead of the entire school being a single-sex school. This could be greatly beneficial with having a co-ed school but single-sex classrooms. Single-sex schools are considered segregated and unconstitutional. Feminists in the women's rights movement, 1972 Title IX, guaranteed gender equality and federally financed schools. This would make single-sex schools unconstitutional under this right. Lack of empirical evidence supporting single-sex schools exists. Measures of achievement are inconclusive. In the video we just watched, Rebecca Bigler discussed how the studies show no benefit over co-education schooling. Co-education improves instruction and discipline by merging different abilities and allowing students to be a countercheck to the other sex. Single-sex schools do not reflect real-world interactions. They do not facilitate positive social relationships between the sexes. They do not learn how to work together, and it does not foster happier marriages later on in life. Rebecca Bigler discussed this in the video that we previously watched. She talked about how students need to be able to interact with students cross-gender and be able to foster happy relationships outside the classroom. Cons for single-sex classrooms and schools continued. Single-sex classrooms do not prepare students for cross-gender interactions in society. In the previous video, we saw Rebecca Bigler discuss how students need to be able to interact cross-genders in our society in order to foster positive relationships and marriages later in life. Students need to be able to communicate with the opposite sex. One article reported single-sex schools are claimed to have lower female aspirations, and they are more prone to move into stereotypical occupations. Rebecca Bigler also discussed this in the video we just watched. She said that single-sex schools can lead to an exaggerated sexism and more gender stereotyping. Teachers report more satisfaction with teaching same-sex girls' classes versus boys' classes due to the behaviors. This is bias results in gender inequalities. In the first video we watched, we heard a teacher say she was able to have a better relationship with her girl students in her single-sex classroom. However, we heard nothing about the male single-sex classroom. Review of the key questions. In the beginning of this discussion, we read off the key questions we would be learning about and thinking about throughout our discussion. It is now time to take a few minutes to review what we have learned. Are single-sex schools a legitimate option for creating an educational atmosphere of gender equality? We heard both sides in this discussion. Many parents are in favor of single-sex classrooms because they feel their child learns better. However, we also heard how it is unconstitutional and goes against Title IX. If the single-sex classroom is done correctly and fosters a positive atmosphere for both male and female students, then I believe it could be a very positive way of schooling. However, it is just my opinion, and it is considered unconstitutional. But you need to form your own opinion based on the facts we have laid out for you. Are single-sex schools considered inherently unequal or equal according to our Constitution? Well, by our Constitution, single-sex schools are considered unequal. As we saw in the first video, the ACL has filed a lawsuit claiming that single-sex schools and classrooms are considered unconstitutional under Title IX. Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender, thus making single-sex classrooms unequal according to our Constitution. Is this mainly a question of culture and preference? It very well could be. In many cultures, single-sex schools are practiced, and they foster beautifully in the regular society. We also saw many parents in the videos that we watched support single-sex schools and classrooms and want to be able to choose the type of schooling for their child. Are single-sex schools fostering a positive social climate amongst the students? Well, in the first video we watched, we saw Bailey Bridge Middle School foster a very positive social climate in some of their classrooms. However, we didn't see all of the classrooms. And in our second video we watched, we listened to Rebecca Bigley say how single-sex classrooms and schools could not foster a positive social climate amongst the students because they needed to learn how to interact with students of the opposite sex. This key question is really based on your opinion and whether or not you believe that single-sex schools and classrooms can foster a positive climate based on the facts and research that we have presented to you. Our second to last question states, are single-sex schools preparing students for cross-gender interactions in society? If we listen to what Rebecca Bigler said in our second video, then no, we are not preparing students for cross-gender interactions. However, there are not many studies done on this subject. Many people believe single-sex schooling does not prepare students adequately for society's cross-gender interactions. However, we did hear parents in our first video say how their children are doing just fine with interactions with the opposite sex. One woman even stated how her son has a girlfriend and only gets to see her at lunch, as it should be. This is also an opinion-based question, and you need to decide how you feel based on the research and the facts that we have presented to you. For our last question, are single-sex schools actually improving academic achievement for both sexes? There is a lack of empirical evidence for single-sex schools to improve academic achievement. In the first video we saw, the kids state that their grades went up a little bit, but we had no research to back that up. But in the second video, Rebecca Bigler states that there are no studies which show a benefit for single-sex schools over coeducation schools. I would have to say, due to the lack of evidence, single-sex schools do not improve the academic achievement. However, you also have to base your own opinions on the facts and research that we have presented to you. I really hope you will take a few minutes and base your own opinions for each of these key questions based on the facts and research that we have presented in discussion. They really are mostly opinion-based questions for each of you. Implications for the future. If single-sex schools and classes become readily available as an option for all students, education will become more personalized and aligned with individuals' and communities' preferences. Students will have more of an investment in their education. They get to choose where they go, either a single-sex school or a co-ed school, thus fostering a better education experience. The same goes for their parents. If their parents get to choose if their child goes to a single-sex school or a co-ed school, it'll foster a better educational experience for the child and parent because they feel their child is getting the adequate education they need. Since much of the data for single-sex schools and classrooms is focused on female academic achievement, the possibility of female domination in the workplace and culture is greater. We, as a society, will have to continue to shift our ideologies with the change in gender equality. We have seen the definitions of masculinity and femininity change over the last century or so, and they will continue to become more fluid as single-sex schools flourish. Single-sex schools can be seen as a legitimate intervention option for low-income and minority students to increase their academic achievement. If school districts take the initiative to implement this style of intervention, it could change the landscape of education, giving students more investment in their education and a brighter outlook on their educational career. However, it could also reignite the topic of segregation and inequality. This will become a matter of whether schools are willing to spend the time and resources needed to implement this kind of structure and change. As we saw in the first video, it can become stressful and even cause principals and administration to lose sleep at night to make sure that they are making the right choice for our children. In the current educational climate, the value placed on standardized testing will possibly push this issue to the side. This brings us to our activity. Please use the link below or the link that is posted on Play-Doh to go to the Padlet discussion and post about the prompt in pink. The prompt that we would like you to post about is: think about your personal, cultural, philosophical, and social ideas and beliefs to decide if you would send your child to a single-sex school or classroom. Would it make a difference if your child was male or female? Please list your reasons for being in favor or opposed to both genders. Also, please write your name and then your discussion post. The code to access this activity is 7787. This brings us to the end of our discussion. We want to thank you all for participating, and we hope you come away from our presentation with more knowledge on the subject of single-sex schools and classrooms. The following slides are our narrative bibliography, and you may review it at your leisure for more information about the subject. Again, we want to thank each and every one of you for participating in our discussion and hope that you came away with more knowledge on single-sex schools and classrooms. Have a lovely day.